What if I told you there's a secret organisation that has its mission of infiltrating the Labor Party and making it pro-abortion? Described by Tony Abbott in 2008 as the ALP's biggest faction, Emily's List is the underground militia that intimidates and bullies the Labor Party into being more and more pro-abortion. Nobody knows about it. We're going to do a deep dive today revealing all its secrets. And that's today on The Dr. Jo Show. So before we get into the very exciting episode that's been on my heart for a long time, I do want to ask you just to subscribe to this channel. It is continuing to grow, which is just blowing the whole team away to see the growth of this channel. And I'm very grateful for all of you. If you're new here, please subscribe. So this story begins in 1992 when Joan Kirner had just finished up as Premier of Victoria. Now, she was the first female Premier of any Australian state. She's from the radical left in the Labor Party, known as the Socialist Left faction. And her mission, if you like, the thing that animated her the most was the issue of abortion law reform. She spoke a big game about getting more women into the parliament, but from her perspective, it was a particular type of woman. It was a radically left woman who believed that abortion should always be legal up until birth and for any reason, that it was essential to women's empowerment, to the cause of feminism. If you think about it, Joan Kirner was your typical second wave feminist. So one of the things that she did when she finished up as Premier was she spoke about this desire with other women within the Labor Party in other states, people like Candy Broad, people like Julia Gillard, people like Carmen Lawrence. Some of these names will be familiar to you. And they realised that they needed to do something if they were ever going to change both the representation of women issue and the abortion issue. And so in 1992, for the next 4 years, they started planning to create a new organisation within the Labor Party that would have the goal of getting pro-abortion women into the party and therefore into our parliaments. Now, for 4 years, what they did was they met, they networked, they were trying to create this consensus, and there was opposition from Labor HQ. Within the Labor Party, there's always been sort of two dominant factions: the left faction and the right faction. And the right faction has had the SDA, the Shoppies Union, which is sort of informally known as like the Catholic Union. They were a pretty dominant faction throughout the 1990s, at the time that Emily's List was being created, and they were very much against abortion, had a conservative view on abortion, didn't think abortion was good for women or aligned with progressive values. But there was this group of radically left women who had a very, very different view, and they wanted to take on this dominant right faction. So at the time, as they were establishing this, they put the proposal to the Labor Party and said, we want to create the Emily's List group that has its goal of getting, pro-abortion women into the party, more women into the party, more women into winnable seats. And they said that's our mission. And the Labor Party turned around to them and said, look, if you're going to create that within the Labor Party, then you can do that, but we're going to have to control the finances because, all fundraising and all funds are managed through Labor HQ. Julia Gillard, Joan Kirner, Candy Broad and Carmen Lawrence, they turned around and said, well, that's not good enough for us. We're going to have to create this separate to the Labor Party, but with the Labor Party as its mission. So in 1996, Emily's List was created. It was created outside of the Labor Party, but as a specific campaign vehicle aimed at getting pro-abortion women into the parliament. Now, 18 years later, Emily's List releases this book called Her Story, and Julia Gillard writes the foreword. And I want to give you just a little glimpse of what she says in that book that tells you what the flavour of this organisation was publicly, and then we're going to talk about what it's actually done. So what Julia Gillard says in this foreword is she says it's the 18th birthday of Emily's List, and it's a perfect time to reflect upon how far the organisation has come and to look ahead to what it can achieve for women in the future. She writes, in the 18 years since, Emily's List has become an effective political, financial and political network that has supported more than 160 women into Australian parliaments. Much has been achieved by Emily's List over the past 18 years, but there is still plenty of work to do. Whilst many more women are entering our parliaments and taking leadership roles within them, this representation is by no means equal. Until women are so commonplace in our parliaments that in our leadership that it is not worth commenting on, then the job is not yet complete. So you can see there that the framing of Emily's List, both in what Julia Gillard is publicly saying in 2014 at the 18-year anniversary of Emily's List, but also at its inception, is that the primary goal of Emily's List is to get women into winnable seats in the Labor Party so that they can then become members of Parliament, so that the parliaments can change, so that the constitution and the makeup of those parliaments can change, so that there's equal representation. That is ostensibly the kind of public goal of Emily's List. But what you see in the fine print and what you see in what the organisation has actually done is that abortion is fundamental to the women that they choose to support. So in 1996, Julia Gillard was one of the people that were, she was a young lawyer back then, and she was one of the people that was designing and creating the constitution for Emily's List. And in Emily's List, the flagship number one priority is what they call choice. And so they say women have the right to reproductive freedom and to control their own fertility, and women have the right to accessible, affordable, safe and legal termination services. So right up front, as the number one priority of Emily's List is the first value, which is about choice. And it's the choice to have an abortion. It's to kill your baby at any point in pregnancy as fundamental to being a member of Emily's List. Almost right from the beginning, we had a glimpse of how successful Emily's List was going to be. In 1997, Emily's List supported 6 women pro-abortion candidates in the state elections. All 6 got elected. We can see at the 18-year anniversary mark, Julia Gillard says that 150 women have been elected into state and federal parliaments. And then fast forward to the present day, 2025, it's 315. So there's been an extraordinary exponential rise in the amount of pro-abortion women Emily's List has been able to support. By 2014, we can see the tremendous impact of Emily's List, particularly in Victoria. So there's certain states where they probably have deeper roots than others, and you can see that as you scroll through the website and see the numbers of MPs they've got in each state. But by 2014 in Victoria, women made up 47% of the Labor caucus and 41% of the cabinet, with 9 ministers, all 9 ministers coming from within Emily's List. So basically, if I put this in a nutshell, to be a woman in the Labor Party and to try and make your way up the Labor Party, by the mid-2000s, it was almost impossible if you weren't from the pro-abortion faction of Emily's List. So if you are now someone like a Claire Scriven who exists in South Australia, you are now a complete outlier by the mid-2000s because the party has been so taken over by this organisation that started as a fringe organisation in 1996, but had a group of truly dedicated pro-abortion women who wanted to take this party over. And they've been so successful about it. And the way that they've done it is under the guise of this is about representation. So what they did was they lobbied the party to create quotas for women. So the N40 rule, that 40% of winnable seats had to have women pre-selected. So it pushed women forward at an incredible rate. It propelled them forward because of this quota. But the type of woman that Emily's List only ever supported was the pro-abortion woman. And so to be clear, it's not even that someone like me who is anti-abortion 100%. I believe that every abortion kills a human being. It's not just me that would get rejected from Emily's List. It's anyone. You might be against late-term abortion. You might have a problem like Renata Klein, who wrote RU486. She's a pro-abortion scholar, but she has a problem with chemical abortions because she thinks they're dangerous for women. She wouldn't be allowed in Emily's List. They don't brook any dissent. And when you do research about this, what you'll find is that women don't want to speak up about this faction because they are so bullying, because they intimidate, because they control your job security. It's like there's just complete radio silence from anyone daring to criticise them. One person who has actually published something about this is the former Premier of New South Wales, Christina Keneally. Now, I think she was able to do this because she was at a position of extraordinary success. She'd made it to Premier against all the odds. She wasn't a member of Emily's List. And so from that position of security, from that position of power, she was able to call it out. And kudos to her for doing this. Christina Keneally isn't even what I would describe as a pro-life Labor MP. She just has some issues with abortions. And in this explosive article in 2015, which is one of the few times that anybody ever breaks through and admits what's really going on. Listen to what she says. She says most, but not all of Emily's List's requirements for candidates accord with Labor's progressive principles. But on the issue of abortion, however, Emily's List only supports women candidates who agree to always support a pro-choice position. Never mind that this is a matter on which the Labor Party accords its members a conscience vote. Emily's List makes it a mandatory litmus test. Fail their test on how women should use their ovaries and you fail to get Emily's List support. So there you have it from Christina Keneally saying you have to be 100% pro-abortion. And if you're not 100% pro-abortion, Emily's List, who says its goal is about getting more women into the party, more women into politics, then they won't support you. So what they really want is brainless drones. They don't want women like you and me, women who are thinking, empowered individuals who have critical thoughts about things. They just want zombies, pro-abortion zombies who sign on the dotted line, give away their conscience to Emily's List and do exactly what Emily's List says. And in return for what? Emily's List gives them money, they give them mentoring, and they give them a route onto the front bench of the Labor Party. If you want to be a successful woman in politics in the Labor Party, the surest way to do it is to sign up to Emily's List. But for it, you have to give them your soul. In my time in New South Wales Parliament, I've known many female Labor MPs who were not supported by Emily's List. The reason was often their unwillingness to sign away their right to a conscience vote on a complex area of law and morality, and quite often their views were shaped by their experiences as women. This includes MPs whose single mothers chose to give birth to them, MPs who struggled with their fertility or lost babies to stillbirth and miscarriage, and MPs who have strong personal objections to abortion. I've known female MPs who are advocates for abortion services and RU486, but reserve the right to oppose other options like late-term abortion. There are also other female MPs, indeed, I was one of them, who think abortion should be safe and legal, but also rarer than it is today. So what Christina Keneally is saying is you cannot deviate from the pro-abortion party line even one iota. Even if you have just a little concern or question about the abortion issue, if you dare raise it, if you dare ever articulate it, then you're just not on the team. You're out of the club. You know, that's how much they bully and intimidate everyone to be for abortion up to birth for any reason, that even a simple question based perhaps on your own personal experience of an abortion, or, you know, there's a Labor MP who I won't reveal the name of. She had a first trimester abortion, and she actually supports first trimester abortion, but she's against late-term abortion because of a personal experience in her own life. But she can't be a member of Emily's List because of that. They just don't allow it. You're not pro-woman in their definition. You're not part of the club if you have any issue with abortion. You know, and it doesn't matter what it is. You just cannot be part of the club. And Christina goes on to write, if the wider Labor Party can accommodate MPs taking a conscience position on abortion, why can't an organisation supporting women in the ALP do the same? And that's the crux of it. They're not really pro-women, are they? You know, people like Julia Gillard talk a big game of how great Emily's List is because they're supporting women. It's women supporting women. But what they really are doing is they're women excluding women. They're women using women, because to them, women are mindless drones who are nothing more than pawns who can further their pro-abortion agenda. And if you're not yet convinced that these guys are authoritarian nutjobs, let me tell you what happened last week. So we were letterboxing the seat of Julia Finn in Sydney against the Radical Greens abortion bill. Now, Julia Finn is the Labor MP for Granville. Now, I was very aware of the speeches that these MPs gave in 2019, and I looked up Julia's speech. And what's very interesting is she voted against abortion up to birth. Now, she comes from a deeply religious electorate. You've got a lot of Catholics, a lot of Muslims, a lot of people that are against abortion in that electorate. And she even says in her speech, you know, 95%, the overwhelming majority of people that contacted me were against abortion up to birth in 2019. So she says that. But she also then says in her speech, I am pro-choice. I support abortion. She's actually a member of Emily's List in 2019 when she gives this speech. And she says, but I can't support abortion up to birth because I think once a baby's viable and they can come out alive, then, you know, for me, I'm troubled by that, and I think we have to find another way. So this is a woman who is pro-abortion. She says that she is. She's a member of Emily's List, but she just has an issue with late-term abortion. And you know, I mean, she's not out of line there. That would be with the vast majority of Australians. You know, I would say 99% of Australians, other than this small group of pro-abortion activists are against killing babies once they're viable. That's just not something that people want to see happen. And so, Julia Finn quite rightly votes against that provision in 2019. But I made the decision to letterbox her seat because I knew that if she had done that in 2019, when she herself identifies as pro-choice, what we really need to do now is get the community activated to make sure that they keep contacting her so that she votes against the Radical Greens abortion bill in 2025. What I didn't know is what happened to Julia Finn after 2019. So during that letterbox drop, it was quite an exciting letterbox drop because we had so many people come. We also had a pro-Palestine, pro-abortion protester come, and you can check out that video. So it was quite dramatic. But I also went into the office, as I try to do, to give the MP my brochure and the information and the facts. And normally they lock the door because they know we're coming, but this time the door was open. I was pleasantly surprised. And I went inside and talked to her staffer at the front desk who was actually heavily pregnant herself, and we had a very good conversation. She herself, said that she has real problems with abortion, and we had a good conversation about that. But at the time I raised with the staffer, because she tried to tell me, well, Emily, that Julia is actually, she's pretty pro-life. And I said, well, she said to herself that she's pro-choice and she's a member of Emily's List. And so the staffer and I talked a little bit about that. And then I left and we letterboxed the seat. But later, the next day, I received a text message from Julia Finn's office because I'd put a video up on social media explaining, what we'd done. And I received a text message from her office saying, can you please amend your video because Julia is no longer a member of Emily's List. She was kicked out of Emily's List in 2019 because she didn't vote for abortion up to birth. Mind you, Emily's List still has Julia Finn on the website. They haven't taken her down. And I raised that with the staffer and she said, look, we're going to be working with them to get that down because it shouldn't be there. They kicked her out. But what does that show you guys? It shows you the extent of the intimidation and bullying of this organisation to women in the Labor Party. See, they're not pro-women at all, are they? They're just pro-robot. When Julia Finn used her brain to go, I'm uncomfortable with killing babies after 24 weeks and right up until birth, they couldn't brook that. They couldn't stomach that because they're not actually for women being autonomous, empowered individuals. They're not for supporting women to be members of parliament just because they're women. Emily's List is so authoritarian in its diktat around abortion that if you don't do what they say, they expel you, they kick you out. And the reason I would guess that they haven't removed Julia Finn from the website isn't because they're just too lazy or they don't have enough admin staff to make that happen. It's because they actually want to cover up how authoritarian they are. They don't want people to know. Like they're an underground organisation. I'm betting that most of the people who are watching this video have literally never heard of Emily's List. When the ACL did its voter guide and gave Labor 8 out of 10 for families, women and children, they didn't even mention Emily's List and they didn't even come up. This is not something, if you do a Google search and a news search as I've done of articles, you will find on one hand the number of articles that mention Emily's List, and yet they're so powerful and they're so dictatorial, but the way, like all good dictators, they operate is in secret behind closed doors. And so when Julia Finn gets kicked out of Emily's List because the bullies in that organisation say, how dare you think with your brain and vote against abortion up to birth, they don't remove her from the website because they don't want to make it obvious. But trust me, everyone within the party, all the other women in the party would know. They would know if you don't do what we say, this is what happens to you. And the thing we all need to be aware of is how extraordinarily successful this underground militia has been. So we've talked about what extraordinary success they've had with the numbers of getting pro-abortion women MPs into Parliament, but let's talk about what they've actually managed to achieve substantively with the laws. So in 1998, Cheryl Davenport, who was one of the founding members of Emily's List from WA, she had a private members bill into the WA Parliament to overhaul the laws there. That was passed. In 2002, 2003, Katie Gallagher, who was in the ACT, she's now a federal minister for women in Albanese's government. So in 2002, she was in the ACT Parliament, and as a member of Emily's List, she made abortion available up until birth for any reason, without even a two-doctor rule, without any kind of caveats. It's just abortion up to birth for any reason in the ACT. That was 2002, the first place to introduce it. That was Katie Gallagher, who's now, Emily's List not only supported in the ACT state parliament, she's now part of the federal government as one of the most senior MPs in that parliament as the Minister for Women. 2005, Emily's List is organising in a major way to attack Tony Abbott as health minister to remove the barriers around RU486. So Tony Abbott, as health minister, blocked RU486 from existing within Australia, and that saved tens of thousands of lives, the fact that he delayed it as long as he did. And Emily's List ran a huge campaign demonising Abbott, and it was Claire Moore in the federal parliament who was one of the co-sponsors, so from Emily's List, seeking to attack Abbott, seeking to make chemical abortions legal and available in Australia. And so that was Emily's List. 2007, Candy Broad, one of the founding members of Emily's List in the Northern Territory, introduced a bill to decriminalise abortion in 2007 in the NT. And then in 2008 in Victoria, now this is a pivotal year, Emily's List works with the Labor Premier, John Brumby, to introduce a bill that makes abortion available up until birth and for any reason. This was the pivotal moment for Emily's List, because this is the thing that they had been set up to do, to create a system of law in Australia where abortion is available for any reason throughout all 40 weeks of pregnancy. In 2008, they ran that campaign in Victoria, and then from there, through Emily's List MPs in every other state and territory. So they passed it in Victoria in 2008, but then in 2013, Michelle O'Byrne, another Emily's List member, got that through in Tasmania. Then they moved to Queensland in 2008 with Jackie Trout and Anastasia Palaszczuk, and they introduced abortion up to birth there. Then in New South Wales, yes, it's the Berejiklian government that allowed it to be debated, but it was Emily's Listers in the party, Penny Sharp, Rose Jackson, Joe Halen, Prue Carr, all of these women seeking to get abortion up to birth legal in New South Wales. And then, then it's WA, Amber Jade Sanderson, it's South Australia. So Emily's List, people like Katrina Hildyard in South Australia, and Susan Close. So, these are women all across Australia. They're like an army of militant pro-abortion women who just, since the inception in 1996, not only have they been getting more pro-abortion women to the parliament because they hoodwinked the Labor Party into the N40 rule, but then they've been able to use their position strategically in every state and territory, and also federally. Tanya Plibersek has been crucial federally. So in 2013, as health minister, Tanya Plibersek put RU486 on the pharmaceutical benefit scheme, which today means that you can kill a baby in the first trimester for cheaper than a milkshake. It's $6.80 if you're on a concession and $30 if you're not. So it's just so ridiculously cheap to kill babies in Australia because of what Tanya Plibersek did, a key member of Emily's List. So, you can see the astoundingly successful legacy of Emily's List, and where that leaves us today is that in the next election and in every election going forward, you cannot vote Labor. You just cannot vote Labor, because the most powerful faction in the Labor Party is the pro-abortion Emily's List. And these women will not tolerate you if you don't support them. And yes, there's a smattering of, brave pro-life female MPs in the party, but you just cannot vote Labor. Someone like Anthony Albanese, or even someone like Peter Malinauskas in South Australia, so these Labor male premiers and the Labor Prime Minister federally, they know that they need this faction on side, that they can't get this unhinged, militant, pro-abortion army offside, or they won't be leader. And so that's why you just cannot vote Labor. That's why Labor cannot be an 8 out of 10 for families, women and children. And if you are anti-abortion, as we are, you cannot vote for Labor ever, period. The Liberals aren't very good either. But the one saving grace for them is that they don't have Emily's List. And so until Emily's List changes, until the Labor Party finds the strength to say to Emily's List, you can exist, we're going to allow you to exist, but we're not going to, give you the dominance and the power and the control that you currently have. Until the Labor Party changes in that kind of way, you just cannot be pro-life and vote for the Labor Party ever.